Now I'm here with an impossible task, which is to emulate Stephan. And those who know him and will understand that it's completely impossible to reproduce his discourse. So he should be here presenting this paper, but he couldn't make it. So what I'll do is go through the presentation very lightly, the way I can interpret and convey that to you, and towards the end a series of slides that kind of reinforce how this thinking reflects on my work, and because I'm his student, so somehow his way of thinking and his ideas have of course influenced it, and I will sort of finish off with that. So, central places and modality environments. Modality environments in particular is a topic I've been addressing in my work. The history, the complexity of this, and something that he's been addressing for many years. So, this image here is to talk about what it is to all of us, which is the relational nature of things. And at this symposium there's not much needed to say about that, because we all deal with the networks and this model of representing the reality as a graph, which just describes the world in terms of relations. But here, by showing this image, it's talking about the fact that actually cities also in themselves constitute networks. And the world is in the network. So this complex relation of the cities, this complex relation of nodes, constitutes a world. So these cities are world cities. The world is made of this network. The world is not such a container. The world is the network. So this construct, which is this relational network of world cities, important cities, they constitute the world. And so the network is the structure. Because not coming from space, people tend to think in containers, one thing inside the other. A construct that is the world that contains other things inside. So someone would represent the world as being a big circle with the cities inside that circle, and the model is slightly different the way we see it. It's not a relational. The world is the network made of the cities, and you can't really disentangle them and just talk about one without talking about the others. Another aspect of this is that this relation is not only a horizontal relation of entities, it's also a historical relation of entities. And over time, cities have grown and related and constituted historical networks. So this is an historical network of trade cities, the Hansa cities in Western Europe. And so the worlds are the network and are also historical. So they evolve over time. So this is a complex of networks, evolves over time. So yeah, I've just mentioned what it is. So this is just an image of the Netherlands being the node, and this is the other nodes in that network of trade within this world of the Netherlands during that period of those trade cities and the ports and locations around the world that are trading. So this is just to reinforce this concept of, and this is the equivalent for a different period. While this one reflects the pre-industrial period, the navigation and the colonization of that period, this is a different network of the British colonization of an industrial one. I think and now we've got a more contemporary one, which is the American colonization in a way, through technology and the internet. I think it's not now actually. I think this one is already fading. We're moving into some other, because as we know, the Asian cities are actually. It's amazing that there's a big dark patch here in Asia, but I think the world is again moving into some other stage. Now this is historical now looking at the city, this historical relation, we're going to look at now in detail, starting with the case of Amsterdam. And so the city starting as a small controlled entity, pre-industrial city served by the port and the canals. But it's not this self-contained walled entity on its own, because the canals are the link to these other worlds and these other places in the world that we've seen in the large world map. So this is that city. And this is an industrial city of London with the railways connecting a country. That is the center of that other world, the industrial Commonwealth world. And so we're shifting scales. So there is the relation of the scales and how these infrastructures, and this is the very important thing, technology. Technology is the infrastructure that allows this shifting scale and allows the relation. Technology is walking in terms of the city, but it's also the seafaring in terms of the connection to the world. Here, the technology, there was a change, so there's a change in scale, there's a change in the types of connections, there's a change to the railway, and still the seafaring with the links to the world. And then when you come to the US, is the change of to the motor car, creating this network kind of constitutes the US. So the US is actually it's quite interesting if you look at maps of countries. If you look at the maps of the countries, the networks actually make a really good shape. If you eliminate the borders, you can see the borders by the shapes of the networks. Having neighboring countries, the shape, the structure of the networks, the density of the networks changes from country to country. So the network actually shapes the country. So again, the sequence just to show this historical relation, which is a temporal relation, and linked to the technology that is linked to our ways of moving as well. So the walking city, then we have the tram coming in and the city expanding beyond its walls in the 1930s. And then nowadays also there, with the motorways, the whole region being connected. And the story can be told in different terms, in terms of technology, in terms of movement, and in terms of the industries, the type of industry and the trade that happens. So going from a pre-industrial to an industrial city to a post-industrial city of commuters and services. So this is these are the big ideas that you've probably read over time from Stephan's work, and how that gets reflected in actually the shape of places. So places, I'm going further down in scale, places are part of this web, a temporal web and a geographical web, a network. And they get characterized by that. So even today, the Amsterdam that was grown and made as a walking city, that technology of the pre-industrial still makes it a walking environment. And if we move further out of Amsterdam into one of these 1930s suburban areas, that is still a walking, but you still see the technology there, and it's still a very large proportion of people taking the public transport. And then if you move to the more contemporary new towns out of the city, you can feel that it is a totally different environment. So even if the technology available and the infrastructure that is available constructs a different world, but it's not just a matter of the time, it's also the accumulation of technologies over time that afford different types of movement. So it's the layering of these technologies and the layering over time. This diagram is just to show that it's this thing I mentioned at the beginning, we shouldn't see things as circles inside circles alone, because in reality the circle is kind of an abstraction. In the first network, the circle represents the city, simply an abstraction of the city, but in reality if we zoom in and take that shell, we see the network within the network. So if we zoom in scales, there is the multi-scale linking of these networks, and there's a multi-temporal linking of these networks. So this is quite an abstract thought, but it's really, for me, it kind of makes it click in terms of the kind of models that we need to produce and the kind of approach that we need to take if we want to start understanding the complex nature of different places. So to understand place, you can't ignore the fact that that place is part of this multi-scale and multi-temporal network. So let me just, this is a map of Amsterdam with the networks of all overlaid. So this is like today. Over time, all the networks, and this is what Amsterdam is today, but this is a result of this process. Let me just quickly move. So now coming to my part of how this gets reflected is I felt the need to create a new type of model to study this kind of work and to be able to describe the places in a richer way. I'm actually going to present this model in more detail in the next session in another presentation, which is focused more on that. But this is just to make the link to how this way of thinking and seeing the world gets reflected in what I'm doing. So, rather than the usual, let's call flat model that we usually use in space syntax, I felt the need to create a layered multimodal network that incorporates all these networks, these technologies that over time have created and create affordances in the region. So being here and being there in this region is totally different. Even if you, in principle, have the same type of land use mix, the same type of density, the way you sit in the region is a completely different thing. So this multimodal network model, as I described, includes the roads, includes the bicycle paths, includes the pedestrian-only areas, includes the modes of walking and driving and cycling, but also includes, I think there is some public transport here. I don't think I've shown it, but yeah, I'll show it in another slide. It also includes the land use, the activities. Oops, sorry. And so the way I do it is really layering all these networks and linking them together. So we've got the private transport system that includes motorways, cycle lanes, and pedestrian ways. Public transport system for the public railway, tram, buses, and metro. The four of them here, each color represents one mode, and the land use, and everything gets linked together by what I call modal interfaces. So each layer being sort of a mode or a system, and they get connected together. And so this is constructed for the region, and we've heard in this conference already this need to go beyond looking at the place. If you want to look at the place, you actually have to look at the region. And Bill was mentioning we're now looking at regions. Maybe we're going to look at the national, eventually the international. It's difficult to stop, to be honest. But once you start having this vision of this interlinked nature of the world in scale and space and time, it's difficult to know where to stop. I stopped at the region, and so I constructed this detailed model that you've seen. So it's a very high resolution in some respects, and covers the region. So this is now just some of Amsterdam, and this is just a short summary of some of the facts. So it has 462,000 nodes and many railways and 3 million land use units. So it's a big model. Just to show you this growth, also all these things become very clear in the Netherlands because it's so organized that it's kind of a laboratory for understanding and measuring these things. Because if you look at the historical, this is the buildings pre-1850, that were built in pre-1850, you see this very clear. I just filtered out buildings after that period. All of a sudden, 1930, boom, the whole area gets built up. The 1930s, 1950s, the 50s is the yellow patches and orange is 1930s. So the new technology comes in and boom, in a few decades the whole thing gets built up. And then another layer as the motorways come in. So up to 1995 so green is the 70s and 70s to the 90s is the blue ones. And now we have new neighborhoods that actually is the focus of my work, which are from this millennium already, like the ivory. But I'm not showing those moments, just showing this progressive growth that is very clearly linked to technology. In the Netherlands, actually, this is so well organized that it's almost impossible to miss. So with my model, the kinds of things that I can measure to try to describe the locale, the place, in the context of this big region, in the context of this relational nature, things like just the proximity to motorways give you also the modality, because my focus is on sustainable mobility, so I separate the modes to understand the affordances of each area in respect to each mode. So that was the car. So we can say that this is the affordance of car in the region, the affordance of the rail, so the proximity to the rail stations, the tram, and then you can overlay all this to make a multimodal map of the modality of each place. So the red patches are places accessible by car only, for example. The blue patches have many other things happening at the same time, like the tram, the rail, and the car. But it starts showing the nature and the character in terms of modes, at least. In terms of modes and the nature of each place. So, what I do in my work is a very rich description and multivariate description of each place. And so I'm just going to show you a few slides of other things that I measure with my model just as an example. So this is just showing you the networks as they are in this area, because I'm going to focus again on Amsterdam. So this is just the public transport net links. These very long blue lines are actually coaches. So it's like long-distance bus journeys that go from the places. So things what one can measure is just the centrality of the non-motorized mode. So excluding roads, excluding the car travel. So the central places, or the centrality using the public transport network. So highlighted immediately, other places get highlighted that are not from the walking city, and you can see the post-industrial places that are not from part of the walking city, but are part of the railway of the regional city, get highlighted. And then the highlights to other kinds of structures that are related to the centrality of the car network. And you can also combine all of them. This is, like I said, just illustrations, or you can just measure the centrality of the transit stops, with the rail always coming as the central places, because they link to the region, and so they have much higher reach. Or we can look at the land use and the buildings and measure the centrality also at the level of each individual building. So this is kind of similar to what Place Impacts tool does. So we can measure the centrality. Actually, there's a very strong shift here that I was very puzzled at. This must be wrong. Stephan says, no, actually that is correct. And previous maps have always shown that in the place, this is an actual shift. If you go to Amsterdam, this area, there's a transition there, because these are post-industrial neighborhoods that have a very different character. So if we add, so the previous one is just walking, but actually walking at a large scale doesn't happen, so we always have to combine it with the transit. And so we have a very different picture. So this is, I would say, a complete picture of transit and walking in Amsterdam, which starts highlighting other areas like the central area, which Amsterdam served by the central station. And this is the car environment, so really the most central places that give access to the region, and there's no reach, or not so easy reach to the core of the city. And all networks combined. So just to conclude, I think I've reinforced these concepts during the presentation. But so the idea of this, the world is a multi-scale complex that we can't really disentangle and just focus on one scale when we're talking about the place is part of this network that we can't ignore, and we can't ignore also that is also an historical complex. That these technologies have come in over time. They create a certain culture in each place. So there is a clear culture of moving and walking in the historical city centers because that was the technology available and that was how the space was structured at that time. So when we talk about new neighborhoods, creating new towns for walking, it's actually a big challenge because the culture has moved on. Now we have cars. Even if you create a new town with the right density, the right land use mix, there's other technologies in place that challenge and really create a big challenge for that to work. There is so because of this historical nature, each movement, each place has its own movement culture, and it's difficult to recreate the movement culture of the past, and because it's something that evolves over time. And this concept of modality environments is the concept that we developed together for this description of the place based on these multi-mode modes: the walking, the transit, and the car, and the model I measure. And just to conclude, the final concept is this of the path dependency. This path dependency of history that exists. And rather than explaining and trying to find the causality that we're always looking for in our correlations, this is happening because of the shape of space. We need to look at this multi-level, multi-scale, and historical structure of space that comes from the past and comes from the technologies that exist that create the place. And so the culture is not necessarily caused, but it exists because the place is constructed in the way that it is. And I think one thing, the best we can do is to try to measure and understand these layers and these relations, rather than just trying to pinpoint a single cause. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
When we, in sort of basic syntax models, we have a theoretical kind of understanding of how the network works, and that's based on human behavior or whatever. As soon as we link these different layers of network together, we kind of lose that, it becomes a different type of model. Have you thought about this? What is this model that you're creating? Is it about accessibility or is it about something else? And the currency that the very basic element that we use in syntax model is change of angle, change of direction, or that sort of thing. But in a complex model like that, we have to change that, move towards things like time of travel or these sort of things. Have you thought about that?
Yes, certainly. So it definitely is a different model. And yes, it still needs some stronger theories to support it, and I mean that's part of my job as well in developing it. In the way the analysis I've shown, they use this mix of concepts. So, for example, the walking and cycling, which is the one that comes from what we've done so far, is based on angular change. When it comes to public transport, I just reflected on the way we think it's the number of stops, therefore it's more topological distance in terms of moving on the transit network. So the geometry of the tracks are not relevant, but the distance of this is 5 stops away is something that is relevant. When it comes to the car, actually I still do the angular distance. Where time comes in, I've analysis with time as a measure of distance, but to be honest, it's not. It's unifying, but it's not the solution in my view. It doesn't describe the structure, or it's the structures I'm trying to uncover. But time is essential as the cutoff distance. So when we're doing the radius, as we call it, then there has to be time. It's the only dimension that is common to all the networks. So it's a combination, the same way we mix angular with metric radius, we can mix all these other concepts. And definitely, we need to carefully consider what is the right measure for this thing that we're describing at each level. We can't just throw everything in one pot and run it in one, just throw it at that part, for example, and just run it.
Yeah.
It has to be a bit more complex than that.
I actually don't know how to ask this question, but regarding the last conclusion that you made, so you say it's not about causality. So in a way, I was wondering how are you going to explain certain things, because it's a very clear, let's say, all-inclusive description of what is there. But how are you going to explain certain things and further predict certain behaviors?
Okay. I think I will cover more of that in the next presentation if you can make it. But for those who can't, first of all, the aim of my model is a model for understanding. So I wanted, in the first instance, to be a descriptive model. Also because there's no theory. Kevin just raised the question. It's something that we still need to understand and explore a lot before we can start saying, oh, this is a predictive model. I've seen too many simulation models based on wrong assumptions. And they very bravely throw data at the simulation model, hoping to and claiming that it predicts something when all the assumptions built into it are simply wrong. And so I don't claim mine is a predictive model. It's a descriptive for me, allowing me to understand it and disentangle this complex thing of this multi-layered and historical structure. The thing with then leading from that, because I don't intend to predict, I don't need to claim causality in a way, because I want to first understand. But what the path dependency concept does is that what I describe is the character of the place as a profile, a multi-level profile. And I link that to behavior, just to highlight the relation, but not claiming that it is because of this mix that this is happening. As I've shown, it comes from the past. I think it's more complicated and embedded. So I create profiles of different places and relate that to the movement culture of the different places and to find patterns. But I don't claim that one causes the other. But as I said, in the next presentation, it will become.
So can you say it's a kind of, let's say, serious phenomenology of what is there? Of careful observation.
Well, yeah, maybe. We can talk more afterwards because I think I'm running